Welcome back, all you ghouls and ghosties, to Eye of the Beholder, where we review 20 years of Dungeons & Dragons miniatures, covering 2003 through 2023. With today's video, we pick back up with our review of Undead Minis, so grab your Ouija board and let's go. When a gem dragon dies, their essence sometimes continues on as draconic shards. Oftentimes concealing themselves inside a piece of armor or a weapon, they will pose as sentient magical items. This allows them to continue to pursue their goals they had in life, all the while assisting whoever possesses it. We get our only Draconic Shard miniature in 2022's Fizzband's Treasury of Dragons set. This could be used as either a sapphire or amethyst shard, as the translucent body wraps itself around a sword that doubtless is its vessel. Not a lot of detail on the body, and there isn't really anything that would identify it as an undead, so this mini could do double duty as a wormling. Score: Paint 12, Pose 13, Playability 16, Pizzazz 13, for a score of 54. Death dragons can be formed from the remains of either metallic or chromatic dragons. From the world of Dragonlance, they are formed from the lingering fires of the Cataclysm, bodies burning violet with negative energy, which is also their breath weapon. Fun fact, not only does a death dragon's breath weapon kill with negative energy, anyone killed by it, as well as any corpses caught in the blast, rise as zombies under the dragon's control. We get this lesser death dragon as one of the 8 featured huge minis in 2023's Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen set. The black chest almost looks like a breastplate over the violet translucency of the body. The slightly lighter violet of the wings that continue down to the tip of the tail makes for a nice contrast. It gazes imperiously with head held high and tail wrapped to the front, daring anyone foolish enough to challenge him. It's pretty effing cool. Can't imagine how WizKids could do better. Score: Paint 25, Pose 18, Playability 18, Pizzazz 25, for a score of 86. Well, I stand corrected. This Greater Death Dragon is a special release tied to the Dragonlance set, and just wow. Obviously much larger than the previous mini, we catch this dragon in mid-flight, trailing tendrils of negative energy from its wings and limbs. Same color palette, black chest, limbs, and body, covering a translucent violet underbelly, with the added details of bits of ornate armor covering the back of the neck and shoulder joints as befitting the Mount of Lord Soth. Yes, the Lord Soth mini reviewed previously can swap out its legs for a saddle to ride this fearsome beast to battle. And while its play is probably limited, I don't care. There is no way this mini gets anything less than a 100. Edelins are undead constructs that are designed solely to protect sites considered sacred or important to a deity or archdevil. They show fanatical zeal in protecting their charge, granting nor expecting any quarter. And while they normally can never leave their posts, they do occasionally go rogue, oftentimes hunting down and killing their creators. Once it gives us our first Edelin, called a Rune-Carved Edelin, in 2008's Dungeons of Dread set. My main issue is, where are the runes? I mean, they are there, but very muted and frankly, not enough of them. This mini should be covered in them, deeply etched and very noticeable, especially for a rare miniature. Basic brown with orangish runes just doesn't cut it. Pose is right out of the moving forward, fist raised to crush its enemies style guide. Score: Paint 10, Pose 12, Playability 14, Pizzazz 13, for a score of 49. "12 years later, WizKids gives us this Ghostblade Edelin from 2020's Mythic Odyssey of Theros set. Looking more like a comely woman, the illusion is shattered by its featureless face. Wispy purple-green tendrils rise from the head and shoulders, may even be part of the dress as well. Posed striding confidently forward with twin blades held wide of the body. It was a little flimsy on the base, but the old hot-cold treatment fixed that. Score: Paint 18, Pose 15, Playability 13, Pizzazz 16, for a score of 62. Our final Edelin Mini comes from 2019's Volos and Mordenkainen's Foes set. Called an Edelin-possessed sacred statue, any old-timer recognizes this. It's the cover art of the original AD&D Player's Handbook, right down to the one missing ruby eye filched by an adventuring party. Pose and paint are nothing special, and I wish WizKids had inserted a translucent red eye rather than just painting it, but once again, nostalgia rules in the scoring. Paint 14, Pose 17, Playability 15, Pizzazz 24, for a score of 70. Ghosts. From Of Christmas Past, Present, and Future, to Casper the Friendly, to Ryder, ghosts have been part of human storytelling from the first time we sat around a campfire. In D&D, they can be anything from vengeful spirits to helpful guides. Often haunting a specific place, person, or object, in some cases they can be dispelled by resolving whatever unfinished business kept them from moving on. We get our first ghost, called a Cursed Spirit, in 2004's Archfiend set. Even without the name, you know this isn't the friendly variety, by the mournful face and the arms outstretched, reaching towards something. Solid white with a serious dark wash for highlighting really shows the detailing of the exposed chest and wind-blown hair running down the back. Score: Paint 12, Pose 13, Playability 13, Pizzazz 11, for a score of 49. A year later, we get this ghostly consort miniature in 2005 Archfiend set. By name and pose, my impression of this mini is that it is a wronged woman, murdered by an unfaithful man, or driven to suicide by same. The basic white of the mini is only broken by the slightly gray hair and the black eyes and mouth set in a truly horrifying expression. Gliding forward on the floor, left hand reaching out for her lost love, this is what a ghost is all about. Score: Paint 13, Pose 16, Playability 15, Pizzazz 18, for a score of 62. Another year, another ghost. From 2006's War Drums, we get the Sacred Watcher. Unlike most ghosts, they are generally characters of great virtue who die with unfinished business. Another all-white mini, but this one has a blue wash for detailing, which gives it a more ethereal look. And what great detailing we get, with intricate designs on the armor, shield, and scabbard. Pose striding into battle with sword raised and gaze leftward, this is, so far, the best of the bunch. Score: Paint 15, Pose 18, Playability 14, Pizzazz 19, for a score of 66. WotC goes translucent in 2008's Dungeons of Dread set. A spectral mage lord is exactly what you think it is, the spirit of an arcane spellcaster. Translucent blue from base to head, but incongruously, still has a solid spell component belt around its waist. Pose is nothing special, drawing itself up to full height, perhaps in preparation of casting a spell. Score: Paint 14, Pose 11, Playability 13, Pizzazz 14, for a score of 52. WizKids gives us their first ghost in 2016's Monster Menagerie set. And here we get an airborne one, sitting solidly on the base and pose to boot. Translucent blue in color, this ghost is another female spirit, nice touch giving it a lantern as if it is searching for something. It's tough to make out much in the way of detailing, but the fact that it is flying is a solid plus, so score is Paint 11, Pose 16, Playability 15, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 57. Two years later, we get this indentured spirit miniature in 2018's Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. Eschewing translucency for purple robes and a silver mask, the only part of the spirit exposed is the outreaching hands, which are nicely detailed, by the way. The swirling of the robes indicate movement as if floating. By the name, I can see using this mini as a guardian, bound to service by a powerful mage. Score: Paint 15, Pose 15, Playability 14, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 59. A Phantom Warrior is a spirit of a fighter who perished on the battlefield or while performing a sworn duty. This miniature from 2021's Boneyard set is our only representation of one. Another translucent blue mini, obviously kitted out for battle with sword drawn and shield raised. Nice touch by WizKids to add wispy tendrils at the shoulders and a fog emanating at the base. Score: Paint 12, Pose 13, Playability 13, Pizzazz 13, for a score of 51. From the same Boneyard set, we get a regular old Ghost mini. Also airborne and female like the one WizKids gave us 5 years earlier, albeit in a much darker blue translucent plastic and a more substantial stand that gives the impression of flight. The stand makes it more sturdy and therefore more playable, and the color makes it cooler than its predecessor, so score is Paint 13, Pose 16, Playability 18, Pizzazz 17, for a score of 64. The next ghost is a named spirit, the Ghost of Erasmus from 2022's Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. An NPC from the adventure of the same name, I like how WizKids was able to give the impression of flight without needing to stand by using a simple technique of having the spirit rise from a fog directly on the base. And for a translucent mini, there is a lot of detail if you look closely. You can even see buttons on the vest. Score: Paint 12, Pose 15, Playability 12, Pizzazz 14, for a score of 53. From the same set, we get this Gallows Speaker mini. These spirits rise from areas of mass death, such as an executioner's site. WizKids wisely refrains from translucence here, giving the mini a grayish-white color palette with slightly darker face and hands. These spirits have a pretty powerful voice weapon, which is cleverly indicated with a clear cone emanating from its mouth. The position of the body and the swirl of the cloak, to me, indicates a rapid spin leftward to bring its voice to bear. Score: Paint 19, Pose 22, Playability 14, Pizzazz 20, for a score of 75. These next four miniatures are all from the Van Richten Guide to Ravenloft set. Meet Lord Goffrey, Split Skull Thug, Chain Thug, and Gouged Eye Thug. Having never played the Ravenloft adventure, I'm making the assumption that these spirits work together in life. Perhaps the thugs were Lord Goffrey's minions, so I'm rating them as a group. All four are made of the same dark blue translucent plastic, and all are pretty well detailed if you look closely. Of the four, the Chain Thug to me stands out most, with the ghostly chain at the fore. Score: Paint 13, Pose 14, Playability 11, Pizzazz 14, for a collective score of 52. Our next ghost is Caradoc the Knight from 2023's Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen set. But wait, I hear you say, that's not a ghost. And you're half right. Caradoc possesses the living, in this case, a Knight of Solamnia. The mini itself is beautifully done. The silver of the ornate armor and the purple of the robe really stands out. And befitting Caradoc's previous occupation, it's fitting that he is brandishing a scroll rather than a blade. Score: Paint 20, Pose 17, Playability 18, Pizzazz 18, for a score of 73. Our final ghost comes from the same set, another named spirit, Ladara. She is the main elven spirit cursed to serve in Lord Soth's court. Seriously, go read the books. Again in the standard translucent blue and using tenuous contact with the base to simulate flight, let's just say that the pose equals her function. In a pinch, you can also use this mini as a banshee, which does up the playability a notch. Score: Paint 13, Pose 15, Playability 18, Pizzazz 16, for a score of 62. Ghouls are truly hideous undead creatures, feeding an insatiable hunger for human flesh. From the OG Monster Manual, unlike zombies, they have a certain low cleverness to them, usually attacking from ambush and in numbers to overwhelm and devour their target. They can also paralyze a victim with a claw or bite wound, making their meal easier to finish off. Those that are bitten but not devoured by a ghoul will eventually die and rise as one at midnight. Our first ghoul comes in our first set, 2003's Harbinger. Shambling forward with its eyes fixed on its next meal, the emancipated body and gaunt face is pretty much the template for your standard ghoul. Sickly grey-grain flesh and tattered brown trousers are it for colors. It's a pretty nice first effort. Score: Paint 13, Pose 14, Playability 15, Pizzazz 12, for a score of 54. Three years later, we get this grave-touched ghoul in 2007's Unhallowed set. Blessed by the king of ghouls himself, grave-touched ghouls are more powerful than your standard run-of-the-mill ghoul. Right off the bat, WotC gives us a gruesome detail of this creature gnawing on a dismembered arm. You can see it tearing a piece of flesh with its teeth. Obviously preoccupied, the pose is not particularly threatening, unless you look at the face. Dark gray for body and gray-brown for trousers is it for color, except for the white and red of its dinner. Score: Paint 13, Pose 16, Playability 15, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 59. Next up is this ravenous ghoul from Deserts of Desolation set of 2007. Same dark gray skin, brown trousers of the previous mini, which makes the bright white fangs and teeth stand out. Hunched over somewhat disguises how big this ghoul must be. Of particular note are the extremely long arms, one scraping the ground as he advances on his prey. For sheer wow factor, I think I'll be using these. Score: Paint 14, Pose 16, Playability 17, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 62. Plague Change ghouls were reanimated by the energies of the spell plague. Smarter and more powerful than regular ghouls, they have another very noticeable difference: the large mouth on its stomach, which you can see quite clearly on this mini from 2008's Against the Giants set. The blue outlined maw on the belly is in stark contrast to the grayish body. Its other mouth, lined with white teeth, is bared at its foes. Playability does take a hit due to the somewhat exotic nature of this particular ghoul, so score is Paint 14, Pose 12, Playability 11, Pizzazz 12, for a score of 49. We get our first WizKids ghoul in 2015's Elemental Evil set. Like the initial WotC effort, It's a pretty basic but eminently playable, with a standard brown loincloth augmented by brown arm and leg bands. Detailing is better as well, particularly the torso and head. It even has a goatee. From a DM standpoint, the one thing you want with ghouls is lots of them, so kudos to WizKids and WotC beforehand in making these common. Score: Paint 14, Pose 14, Playability 15, Pizzazz 13, for a score of 56. We get our final ghoul in the Boneyard set of 2021. More animated than the previous ghoul, I'm guessing because it just eaten. Note the severed arm in its left hand. Pose, crouched low and arms swinging, to me looked like it's charging toward a hapless group of adventurers, no doubt with several of his buddies close behind. The paint is an almost exact match to the previous, even down to the same brown arm and leg bands. You definitely want to mix these two minis together for an epic ghoul battle versus the PCs. Score: Paint 14, Pose 16, Playability 15, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 60. Ghasts are more powerful versions of ghouls and are often found mixed in with their lesser brethren. Besides being stronger, they emit a foul stench that affects all who dare close to melee distance to fight. You can also distinguish between ghast and ghoul by a ghast's extremely long tongue. Our first ghast comes from 2004's Giants of Legend set. Not really a lot to recommend this one. The blue-gray body is not particularly detailed, the loincloth is so similar in color that it might as well be monochrome, and the only detail worth mentioning is the bone it holds in its hand, either as a weapon or the remnants of a meal. And, as a teenage girl on prom night might say, it's no tongue. Score: Paint 8, Pose 11, Playability 10, Pizzazz 10, for a score of 39. We have to wait 13 years to get a halfway decent ghast in the Monster Menagerie 2 set of 2017. Emancipated body? Check. Ambling toward its target with a dead gleam in its eyes? Check. And there's the tongue we were looking for, although I do wish it was a bit more pronounced. Muscle detail on the arms and chest are quite good, and I like that WizKids used a more yellow color for the loincloth, arms, and leg band. It'll do. Score: Paint 13, Pose 13, Playability 15, Pizzazz 14, for a score of 55. Our final standard ghast comes 4 years later in the 2021's Boneyard set. And WizKids uses the same trick it did on a pair of ghouls before, i.e. using the same color palette as the previous ghast, but giving this one a much more kinetic pose, crouched slightly with arms akimbo. Tongue is perfect here, long and red, with a slight curl to boot. As before, mix the two minis together for flavor. They are both common, so go wild. Score: Paint 14, Pose 15, Playability 16, Pizzazz 18, for a score of 63. I said our last standard ghast. Meet the Borrow Ghast from 2023's Bigby's Presents Glory of the Giants. You're not hiding this guy amongst a bunch of ghouls. This is what you get when a giant dies with an empty stomach and full of rage. I love how WizKids use translucent purple to denote the stench rising from the creature. The detailing is solid. Note the exposed kneecap and dead eyes. The paint is exceptional. And while I'm not sure how playable it is, what a cool encounter for higher level parties. Score: Paint 22, Pose 17, Playability 15, Pizzazz 24, for a score of 78. We go out with a bang for our final miniature of the video, the Grave Drinker. This special release tied to 2022's Van Richten Guides to Ravenloft set is massive. Note the medium-sized mini for scale. It's basically the same Purple Worm mini released 2 years earlier, just painted differently. You'll see it when we eventually make it to monstrosities. The ghost white creatures depicted bursting from a barren soil, red maw lined with white teeth wide open as if about to engulf a hapless party member. Important detail, note the runes running down one side of the body. Can't have a grave drinker without runes. Score: Paint 20, Pose 21, Playability 14, Pizzazz 25, for a score of 80. And with that, we finished part 2. Join me on the next video where we look at 3 types of undead: the ultra-powerful Lich, the vengeful Mourns, and that staple of monster movies, the Mummy. Thanks again for watching Isle of the Beholder. Leave a comment if you like.